and get started. First, we'll start out with some public comment. This is the opportunity for anyone to speak on any item that is not on the agenda tonight, but under the purview of Innovate 680. Do we have video first? Oh, do I need to? I forgot. You know, I don't think I got it. Normally, Terry, you send me a script, and I didn't get a script. So that's probably why I'm just winging it. No, I mean, I have the agenda. I'm not concerned about that, but just sort of so do you want to play the recording and then we'll go ahead?
This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Citizens participating in person wishing to speak should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand in Zoom or submit a public speaker card, and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Okay, and I will just note, this is our 19th meeting, so we've been doing this for a while, everybody, so thank you so much. Erica, let's go ahead and do a roll call as well. We were just waiting for Robert to arrive so we could do that.
Member Alt Verosi for Member Armstrong. Member Carlson.
Here.
Member Josie.
Here.
Member McCullough. Member Obringer.
Here.
Member Wren. Member Stepper.
Here.
Member Storr.
Here.
Member Will, absent. Vice Chair Nowak.
Here.
Chair Anderson.
I'm here as well, and we did do public comment prior to the broadcast, just making sure we didn't have any written, actually we did get some written public comment, but I don't think it was general public comment, it was specific to agenda items.
That's correct.
Okay, and then I will reiterate the offer. If anyone present wishes to speak to any public comment item not on today's agenda, we're happy to entertain that. Okay, we do have one consent calendar item, and that is our Innovate 680 committee minutes of February 12th, 2025. And does anyone have any comments, changes, or a motion?
So moved. I will second. Oh.
Okay, you have a motion. We have a second. We're going to let you choose who you want to pick. Well, okay, we're giving it to Stepper. Nowak made the motion.
Sorry.
Okay, and we don't have anyone online, so we can do all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? Not hearing any, seeing any, that motion carries unanimously. Unless you want to do a roll call vote. Do you prefer roll call? Okay, it's when you serve on 30 different boards and committees, there are different ways to do it. So if you would like to do a roll call vote, we will do it that way.
Okay, I'll do a roll call. Member Carlson.
Aye.
Member Josie.
Aye.
Member Obringer.
Yes.
Member Stepper.
Yes.
Member Storr.
Yes.
Vice Chair Nowak.
Yes.
Chair Anderson.
Yes. Okay.
Passes.
That did, in fact, pass unanimously. So we are now going to go on to our regular agenda items. Our first item for discussion is informational. We will not be taking action on it, and it will be presented by Stephanie who is going to provide an update on the Innovate 680 program and project. So go ahead, Stephanie, please.
Good evening, Chair Anderson and committee members. My name is Stephanie, Director of Projects, as CCTA and also the program manager for Innovate 680. This item is one where I present to you all just updates on our 6 projects that are under the program, which you are all very familiar with at this point, I think. I will skip projects that are agendized later in the meeting, and only focus on ones that are not specifically agendized later on in the meeting agenda. So for the Express Lanes completion project, I believe last time we met, I shared the preferred alternative that was chosen. We're working hard in completing the environmental clearance to be completed later in the summer of this year. Concurrently, we have started 30% design package, the effort to do so in order to expedite project delivery, and also gearing up for the potential of using progressive design build as a delivery model. In terms of the mega funds, we were awarded $116 million for this project for our initial phase. So 2 weeks ago, the funding seems to be still in play. It's just we're waiting for the new administration to develop a new funding templates for the agreement. So we've just been waiting for that to be developed. And we'll continue to follow up with the federal staff on that agreement moving forward. For the part-time transit lane project, we've had a scoping document that was completed a couple years ago now. As we're waiting for guidance from Caltrans on part-time transit lane operation, and also just wanting to do more testing and training to address concerns from, or just working with CHP and Caltrans, we're conducting some testing and training at Momentum Station, and that's funded by a state grant called TIRSIP grants that we got a couple years ago. We allocated the TIRSIP funding in March, and this project team has developing the approach to go to construction of these testing and training elements at Momentum Station. The advertisement has gone out, and we're hoping to start the operations after construction of those elements later in 2025. The Shared Mobility Hubs is agendized
Recording in progress.
later in the agenda. So I'll skip that one. For ADS, the notes here have now been outdated, I guess. So for the issues that were concerning the Rossmore shuttle as well as the shuttles at Martinez, those have been resolved. As of today, those 2 shuttles are up and running. The last item regarding the third pilot, which was a pilot project or demonstration project on I-680, that was also completed in February, and that was using a small platoon of connected vehicles to see how they can influence traffic flow with just having them connected and operated together. We're able to influence traffic on the corridor, and that has been completed, and the final report is being developed. For the MOD project, staff is continuing to work with BART on resolving these trip planner issues, but in the meantime, we can report out that the telematics devices on the vehicles for car share have been installed, and the plan is still to deploy the app later in 2025. For advanced technologies, there are 2 projects. One is the coordinated adaptive ramp metering, which we'll go over next. But for CATs, or coordinated adaptive traffic signals, we were awarded a grant late last year to do system engineering of a demo corridor. And that's spanning from Danville Boulevard, Harts, and San Ramon Valley Boulevard. That covers Walnut Creek County and San Ramon, and a couple of Caltrans intersection or interchanges, in order to demonstrate how adaptive traffic signals can be operated multi-jurisdictionally, as well as to incorporate multimodal functions. So that grant is being, the logistic of it is being developed with MTC, who is the grantor, and we're working on funding agreements and getting consultants on board. So that's where we're at with that project. And this is a schedule as of March, updated in last month, really to demonstrate, I think last time when we shared that we have passed the planning mode on all of these projects. A lot of them are hitting the design phase or being in the middle of design phase, such as the Express Lane project, the Mobility Hubs project. And then some are under operation, such as the shuttles. So I just want to convey that we have stepped away from the planning mode and really getting into implementation as a program. And with that, I'll take any questions and comments that you may have.
Any questions from committee members? Welcome, Sridhar. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Platoon of vehicles on 680. Are we just still testing that at Momentum, or we're actually out on 680? Or
It was a short pilot or demonstration. I think it was a course of like 2-3 weeks.
But they were actually on 680?
Yeah, they were.
And so how many vehicles were
I think it
in?
was 4 plus a lead car.
Okay.
I'm confirmed I'm correct. 4 cars plus the lead, so 5 total.
Okay.
And I think the outcome was that even with that small platoon, it was able to successfully influence the traffic flow in a positive way. And we can certainly do a presentation further in the next time if we
Someday
want.
I'd love to learn more, because this is one of those things that we've been promoting for many, many years. Were they able, as a platoon, to use the express lane? Were we trying it out there, or were we doing it in
I'm
regular
not sure they
travel
ran
lane?
on the express lanes, but I can confirm
I'm
with the
just
team.
curious if that's the case. And anyway, I'd love to hear more in the future.
Sure. Yeah, I
Any
can note that as the
other-
next item.
Anyone else intrigued by platoons of cars secretly traveling down 680?
Yeah, so I do have a follow-up,
Oh, please,
Chair.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I understand that the pilot is done, and that there's a report. So what happens next? Since it sounds like it was successful, are there plans to deploy the platoon again, or what happens now?
It was part of the ADS project with the 3 demos, the 2 shuttles, plus this third, it's called personal mobility on I-680. There's no funding for our next phase. I think the feds are interested in data and the findings of the demonstration, and we'll report out our findings and our data. And I'm not sure if there's a phase 2. There's no funding for a phase 2, but I think with the successful deployment, perhaps there is some future funding that could be available. But I think we're always exploring those kind of options out there.
Great. Any other question? I assume we were filming it. I mean, were we filming it, or just extracting the data from the
No, I
vehicle
think
systems?
I think there were recordings. But yeah, I'll talk to the project team to see if they can come back with a presentation as they're
Okay.
developing the final report and give some
Yeah,
findings.
to
and
me,
available.
it's really one of those funny parts of Innovate 680 that we really have talked about for 19 meetings and even before then. And it's hard to completely visualize how you can safely have cars travel. I'm curious about how close they're actually traveling, whether or not everyone's going to stay in the platoon, or if there is, I'm curious about the app or the software that I'm assuming we're engaging for the cars to stay in sync, so you don't have the car number 2 say, oh, I forgot the bread and milk, I'm getting off now, disrupting the platoon, all of that sort of thing. I'm being a little facetious, because obviously in the trial that would not happen, but in real life it could. So I'd love to learn more, so thank you.
Sure, yeah, we can put that on our next meeting agenda for a deeper dive on that effort.
Okay, do we have any public comment on this, either written or online?
We do not have any
In
public
person?
comments. In
Okay.
person or remote.
Okay, great, thank you so much. And we're going to then move on to another informational item. And Darren, you're up. You're going to present this to us. Oh, all of you are. Okay, I see Darren's there. Okay, we've got, and there, next page, Danielle Ong. Okay, that's what helps when I go into the next page. And so we're going to talk more about 680 Advanced Technologies, project update on the ramp metering strategy, coordinating for Innovate 680 corridor.
Thank you. We're going to tag team this item. So my name is Al Mong. I'm the acting Deputy District Director for Caltrans District 4. I want to quickly recap what we reported to the committee last time. Caltrans, we programmed a project to invest ITS and the fiber implementation along 680 corridor back in 2020. We split the project to coordinate better with the Innovate 680 effort. So first phase 1 of the project, last time I reported, we getting the construction allocation from CTC in March. So we RTL the project back in January of 2025, and we got the construction location. The scope of the project is we will be installing ramp metering infrastructure at 45 ramps and a number of ITS elements. And as far as for the COM project, we're going to be installing mid-ramp queue detector boxes, fiber optics to be ready for the coordination with COM effort. We anticipate to complete construction in summer of 2028 for the phase 1 project. For the phase 2, we just get internal approval within the department. Let me take a step back. The scope of the phase 2 is to make geometric modifications at 4 ramps, and Caltrans will be contributing these funds to the COM segment 1 and 3A project delivery. So we're going to deliver as a one package. As far as the status update, we got the internal approval within the department to go to May CTC meeting for the funds contribution to the COM project. As far as the implementation plan, once the phase 1 project's completed, which is summer of 2028, we're going to rest the metering lights on green for that 45 ramps that we're going to install. And once the COM implementation is done, we're going to activate the metering for the whole corridor. The ramps that we install metering, it will be we call it ARM. So this is a Caltrans metering system. The ramps that we're going to implement COM system, it will be operated by CCTA and the consultant. As far as the next steps, we're going to be evaluating, we're going to be identifying how we're going to evaluate the efficiency between COMs and the ARMs, and how we're going to, we kind of need to flesh out the detail on the O&M, because the COM project is a 3-year pilot, right? So we're going to need to work on the O&M regarding roles and responsibility. What will be the roles and responsibility between beyond that 3-year, and then trying to identify funding opportunities if we are to implement COM system throughout the corridor. Let me see. So I'm going to hand it over to Darren.
Thanks, Ong. So I'm Darren Henderson. I'm the corridor manager for Innovate 680. So we have the opportunity to build upon the work that Caltrans is already doing in the corridor to implement and demonstrate a more advanced coordinated adaptive ramp metering strategy. The long-term vision is to ultimately implement CARM along the entire length of the corridor, but recognizing that we have to kind of break it into segments in order to be able to make it implementable based on the funding that's available. We've been focused right now on CARM segment 1, which is the piece shaded in blue on this map. That's the northbound side from Al Costa at the Alameda County line to Olympic just south of State Route 24. That includes 14 ramps, 4 of which Ong mentioned are going to be widened as part of the project, and Caltrans is contributing to CCTA in order to help accommodate that. And then Caltrans will actually be installing ramp metering equipment at a number of at the remaining locations in the corridor, as Ong mentioned. And then more recently, CCTA was successful in achieving a mega grant award. And while we haven't got the money obligated yet, the expectation is that it will come. And that is allowing us to expand the scope of the project further to the north. So the section that you see in purple on this diagram is what we call segment 3A, and it will allow us to include an additional 5 ramps north of State Route 24 up to Willow Pass Road. As Ong mentioned, those are being coordinated so that they can be delivered as a single package. and Caltrans will be delivering the rest of the corridor initially, all of those segments that are identified in green. And as Ong mentioned, using their ARM system in the interim until we find the funding in order to implement CARM. So a few milestones. We did accomplish the environmental document back at this time last year. More recently, a major milestone was the approval of the project report. That happened on April the 3rd. It's been a long time coming, so this was a very critical milestone in the project. That's allowed us to move forward into final design. So that work is now proceeding, and we are also simultaneously refining the systems engineering and the concept of operations that helps guide how the system's actually going to be deployed. I mentioned previously, and Stephanie also mentioned, the mega grant award. For CARM purposes, it includes just under $50 million for the CARM Segment 3A project. As I said before, that allows us to extend the limits of the project further to the north through the major bottleneck that we have just outside the window here in central Contra Costa County, and allow us to implement CARM at 5 additional ramps in that segment. It also provides funding for the operation of the pilot for 3 years. So a critical funding contribution to the project. And so we're eagerly awaiting the ability for CCTA to execute that funding agreement with the federal administration. So work is underway on CARM Segment 3, anticipating that funding will come through. As I mentioned before, we're in the process of starting design on Segment 1. So we are mobilizing to also design the additional ramps in Segment 3A. That involves updating some of the existing documentation. So we need to do a revalidation of the environmental documents and a supplemental project report to extend those limits. So that is underway. We're also updating the cooperative agreement with Caltrans to reflect the change in the scope of the project. We will be using a labor agreement as part of the project in order to ensure that we meet the union requirements for the work that will be conducted in the corridor. So CCTA is working with unions to develop that agreement to guide exactly what that will look like. Ultimately, the expectation is that it will be awarded as a single contract, so that all of the work on CARM-related improvements will happen under a single contract and not multiple pieces that will be overlapping, which obviously is not desirable. So you can see that sync up on this schedule. The dark blue line represents basically where we are at the end of Q1. The Caltrans shop project, as Ong mentioned, is the top blue bar, and they are imminently moving into construction, as Ong mentioned. As far as the Caltrans Phase 2 and the shop Segment 1 and 3A projects, you can see that those are all now in PS&E, having completed different phases of work in project development process, and ultimately will be synced up at the end of this calendar year into a single construction package that will be bid and awarded for the project. So back in August of last year, the Executive Steering Committee, which is the executive directors of CCTA, Caltrans, and MTC, met and discussed this project, the ramp metering project, and had 3 actions to staff. The first was to develop a roadmap for the ramp metering deployment, and a lot of that is what I've shared with you already in terms of how the projects are syncing up, how the projects are being funded, et cetera. The second was a directive to Caltrans and CCTA to continue to investigate alternative funding sources in order to advance the implementation of CARM on the southbound side of I-680, especially south of State Route 24. Most of the ramps in that section are adequate, fairly readily able to be adapted for CARM purposes. And so the hope is that we can secure funding from an alternative source to advance the implementation of CARM along that segment. And obviously of interest to you as local agencies, as well as the 2 lead agencies, is developing various agreements to define roles and responsibilities for operations and maintenance of the project, who to call if there's any concerns, who's responsible if something goes down, and that work is ongoing. So the mega grant obviously helps us to secure the funding package for the delivery of segment 1 and segment 3A. It again allows us to extend the limits of the project and also fund the implementation of the 3-year pilot. And as I said before, we are continuing to investigate other options for implementing CARM on the southbound side as quickly as we can. So I'm actually going to turn over to Danielle now. She's been involved as the stakeholder coordinator for the project, working directly with your communities, with your technical staff, to solicit input on the project and to help guide the process of developing the O&M agreements. And then once we get through that, we'll come back for questions and answers.
Thanks, Darren. So hello again, Danielle Stanislas, your Stakeholder Engagement Manager for the program, and also part of the Innovate 680 Systems Management team. So I'm sort of wearing both hats for this presentation. Some of you have heard this before, but I think it's really important, just given kind of where we're at, about starting to really think about operations and maintenance. So just wanted to remind you guys that we did meet individually with all of your technical staff. And some of the feedback that we heard amongst the key takeaways was that there was a necessary O&M agreement and an O&M framework that needs to be put in place specifying all of these roles and responsibilities, but it needs to be for the entire corridor. So this is regardless of whether it's operated by Caltrans or it's operated by CCTA. It has been expressed that there needs to be a single feeling to the end user when they travel the corridor. And so this O&M framework needs to properly document the performance requirements and thresholds, and we had some conversation with you all last meeting about that. And again, needs to go into those roles and responsibilities, specifically highlighting how operational issues are going to get resolved. So the approach that we're taking is to have 2 separate but related agreements. So first, there's going to be a larger MOU for the entire corridor. This MOU would be a signatory by CCTA, Caltrans, and all of the local TAC member jurisdictions. So the expectations for ramp metering deployment and operations would be outlined for each of the segments, again, with an eye towards having a seamless experience for the end user. And I'll go over a schedule for this, but basically we're expecting to have a first draft of this MOU for review by your technical staff towards the end of May. Then for CARM segment 1 and 3A in particular, there is a necessary agreement just between Caltrans and CCTA that's going to spell out the day-to-day operations and maintenance agreements of those segments. So specifically the roles and responsibilities for how the equipment is getting operated, the specific performance thresholds for the equipment, how the funding is going to be allocated, and this of course would get initiated after that larger MOU is developed. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is a high-level overview of the structure of this MOU. The areas that are highlighted in bold are those that your staff in particular were most interested in and we had the most conversation about. So again, roles and responsibilities, communication protocols, and performance metrics. So some of the key takeaways that we heard, this is both from you all at the last PAC meeting in February, as well as the last time we met with the larger TAC ConOps working group, and that was at the end of January. So we heard a similar flavor from all of you, and that was that there needs to be clear roles and responsibilities for all agencies that are spelled out, and this includes the local jurisdictions. There needs to be those roles that are specified for the performance monitoring and the evaluation, how that's being conducted, but then perhaps equally or more important, the operational responsibilities for day-to-day operations, but also for how their enforcement activities are going to be carried out and incident management protocols. Again, we heard that from multiple agencies that the need to spell out these formal communications protocols, including establishing a single point of contact within each agency and making sure that there's a unified response so that if there are inquiries from the public, there's consistent messaging back to them. And then you guys recall that we had extensive conversation at the last meeting about some of the corridor performance metrics that would get included in these agreements. So things such as ramp queuing, overall corridor, the freeway mainline metrics, so travel time, safety, things of that nature, I should say. The crash and violation rates, we spent some time talking about that last time, and CHP has been a part of this conversation, making sure that we're tracking those things as well. And then also looking at the impacts on transit, so tracking things like on-time performance, reliability, things like that. So where do we go next? So we are going to have some additional individual conversations with your technical staff once that draft MOU is released. So you can see by this schedule graphic, everywhere where there is sort of a light blue box, that is where the local jurisdictions are being consulted. So right now, we're in the process of having an initial draft that's being reviewed by CCTA and Caltrans. Then it will be sent to the local jurisdictions for review. That's around the June timeframe. There'll be some additional feedback, and then we'll have another opportunity for review towards the end of the summer. And all of this is aimed with having a final version of this towards the fall. So that would be the intent here. And then we're also making sure to cycle back not just to Caltrans District 4, but also to strategically bring in Caltrans Legal, which you have to go through headquarters for that. So this is the time frame, and so there will be additional conversations with the collective TAC Ops working group. And then as we've discussed with you all, we do anticipate that we will be having additional presentations. We've heard from your staff to your city councils that that would be useful, but we've also heard from you to be strategic about that and do that as it's closer to operations and once we have some meat on the bones for them to actually discuss. So with that, that is the last slide that we have here. So I will take a pause to see if there are any questions, and it could be for anything I spoke on, Darren, or Alma spoke on.
Okay, and it looks like Sue is ready to go. And then following Sue, I see Karen's hand. So Karen after Sue.
So can you break down the mega grant piece? Because we've got the mega grant piece, well, we've got the 100 or so million for the express lane, so that's not part of this. And then you've got the piece that's for the braided ramp, but now I'm seeing all this additional stuff that I was sort of unaware was part of the mega grant. So how do the numbers split out for that remaining
Sure.
piece?
So the total, maybe I can back up. When we applied for the mega grant, it was Express Lane Phase 1 that we got funded, CARM, a coordinated adaptive ramp metering, and actually shared mobility hubs. It was a package of projects to holistically address the congestion on 680. What we did get funding for is Express Lane Phase 1, which was in amount 116 million, and it's about 50 million for the coordinated adaptive ramp metering. So with the extra 50 that we, through MEGA, we were able to extend the limit to Willow Pass. You may recall, like last year before MEGA came through, CARM ended at Olympic.
Right.
So with this extra 50, we're able to extend CARM implementation to, from Olympic to Willow Pass Road.
So where's the money for the braided ramp?
The braided ramps reside in the Express Lanes project.
Okay, and how much was that braided ramp expected to cost? That's a pretty big project. I'm just concerned
Yeah.
50 million is not going to be enough.
Oh,
because
50 million does not include the braided ramps. So the braided ramps is part of the Express Lane project.
It's
You
part
may
of the
recall we left a
116.
gap. Yeah, the 116 covers the Express Lane construction plus the braided ramps. You recall the selected alternative
Right.
is, preferred alternative is one that leaves a gap.
Right.
With the braided ramps, it really alleviates that operational deficiency at that braided ramp location.
Okay, so the braided ramp's part of that. Okay.
Yes, correct.
That helps me. The second piece is, my understanding was that piece north of 24 was also, a lot of those ramps are not sufficient size to do CARM on, because there's not enough storage there. Is the increased capacity part of that project, or is it not? Because there was a whole lot of discussion on, when we talked about this last, on
Yeah.
whether to even do all this if there was not going to be sufficient storage on those ramps to ever do CARM. And so I'm just trying to understand, if in Phase 3A, we are actually going to expand ramps, or we're not going to be able to expand ramps. I'm assuming those dollars are not included in the mega grant if expansions are needed.
Yeah,
And
we
then-
kept it under, well, Darren can better answer this, but we are deploying more detectors to address the ramp storage deficiencies. I mean, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but, and also we're making changes where we can. We need to also keep it within a reasonable environmental clearance level, not to exceed certain.
Yeah, so,
You can-
again, we're limited to $50 million,
Right.
and your recollection is correct, very good, congratulations.
Thank God for
But
memory.
we will be doing improvements at two of the ramps, at Oak and at Willow Pass, where we can accommodate additional capacity. So that is part of the project, and Francis, you can intercept if I'm getting it wrong. And then as Stephanie pointed out, the expectation is that by increasing the instrumentation through that segment, we can better manage those ramps that are not, that don't have sufficient capacity so that they can work more effectively. And then ultimately, once the braided ramp project gets in, that helps to resolve part of the problem at one of the remaining ramps. And then again, in the future, as we secure additional funding, we can always go back and rectify other ramp locations. So we're basically, as Stephanie said, going to do as much as we possibly can with the resources that we have available. We are hopeful that by implementing CARM in that segment, we will be more effective at managing the limitations that we have. And then, again, in the future, we can always come back and try to rectify anything that's deficient.
Right, so those ramps that, somehow my thing got turned off. So those ramps that do not have sufficient storage, what is going to be installed on those ramps, or is anything going to be installed on those ramps?
There will be ramp meters installed on those ramps.
But they're just going to stay green? This was the
no.
big, no, they're not going to?
As part of the Caltrans project,
Right.
before we had the funding for 3A, they were going to install ramp meters on those ramps, and then once the system became active, they would get turned on, and then if necessary, they would put them resting green during the peak of the peak if the ramp wasn't able to handle the storage requirement. We are going to do improvements at the ramps that we can. And in fact, Stephanie and I were at the county complex this morning, meeting with county staff to discuss the Oak ramp and what's being proposed as part of that, because it does involve using some of the turn lane capacity on the arterial approach for storage. So we wanted to explain how that's going to work and what that will look like and how we can protect it from being excessively queued. But basically, we'll do what we can. We will run all of the ramp meters in that stretch using CARM, so that way the system will be able to try to balance the demand across all of those ramps. So where we do have highly deficient ramps in terms of their storage, the system gives us the flexibility to identify that. And if we see any sort of queue building, we can prioritize balancing that with other ramps in order to help minimize the potential impact for that backing up. And then again, if we get to a place where it's just not able to operate effectively, then we can release the ramp meters and you know.
So what I'm hearing you say is those that have storage, you'll probably have to use a little bit more.
Yep.
If the other ones
That's a fair
don't
statement.
have that, okay. I
That's a
just,
fair
I wanted to
statement.
make sure I understood what you were saying.
Yeah, and I think also when we were meeting with county staff to clarify that even without CARM, it would be the Caltrans ramp metering system. It was getting ramp metering regardless. In this case, securing additional dollars from Mega help us make the ramp metering as much as we can better, like what Darren was just explaining. I
And
just wanna
Caltrans is
clarify.
looking also at extending the storage at, is it Lawrence, Francis?
That's where the braided ramp goes in.
Yeah, it'll ultimately get replaced by the braided ramp, but
Yeah.
in the interim, they're looking at extending the storage on that ramp by pushing the threshold further downstream, so that way we can get at least some more linear feet of storage on that ramp. So again, both CCTA and Caltrans are doing everything that we can with, you know, with the hand that we've been dealt on that particular segment. And again, by using CARM, as you said, the system will hopefully be able to do a better job of managing those queues across all of the ramps in the corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Karen, go ahead. Then
Okay,
Robert,
thank you. I
and then Sri.
wanted to ask about, we are the ones who haven't had ramp metering for the most part over here, so a lot of people don't know what to expect, except from what they've seen out of town or downstate at other places. So are we keeping track of what improvements are not happening on the CARM system that we're trying to get with the adaptive metering that is being piloted? But all the other ones, are we picking up things that they've improved on over the last few years as we're working? In other words, things on regular ramps that are not adaptive metering probably make changes too as traffic and things change.
Right, so Caltrans is doing improvements on some of the ramps that are within their jurisdiction, where they, the ones in their phase 1 project. You know, so to the extent that they can accomplish additional storage, they are doing that. And in some of the ramps, they're adding HOV bypass lanes, which is a standard requirement under the ramp meter design manual. They are going to be using their most advanced algorithm, the ARM system. So it gives some adaptability. It's certainly not as coordinated as CARM, hence the difference in the name. But it does. It's the best tool that they have available currently. And then, sort of to your question. As Vice Chair Nowak pointed out, when we certainly have discussed where we and analyzed all of the ramps in the corridor as part of the work that we've done in preparation for CARM, with that expectation that we'll ultimately implement CARM along the full corridor. So we know where we do have deficiencies in ramps based on the current design in shop. So we obviously can keep that in mind as we go out and secure additional funding, knowing that there are going to be some ramps in those segments that are going to require some pretty significant heavy lifting in order to get us to a place where they can actually operate effectively. And then again, if we're able to implement CARM along the whole corridor, the system obviously has better capability to deal with those isolated locations where we have deficient ramps by spreading that burden up and down the corridor. So we're definitely keeping it in mind where we have issues. I think the other thing that's worth pointing out, you raised a very valid point that we don't have ramp metering currently on this stretch in Contra Costa County. So there is an expectation that as we get closer to actually rolling out ramp metering, both for the Caltrans shop project and also CARM, that there will be a robust outreach effort happening from both CCTA and Caltrans cooperatively, so that we can educate the public on what's being done, why it's important, how the systems will work. Generally, they'll look very similar to the users. There'll be some slight nuances in the way that the two systems operate, but for the most part, it's a green signal. It turns green when you can go through. But again, we'll go through that process of doing some education and outreach. If you're interested, RCTC is doing a similar project. Their project is currently under construction, so they're expected to be up and running by the end of this calendar year.
Sorry, RTCT.
RCTC, the Riverside County Transportation Commission.
Thank you.
Your sister agency in
None of us would have guessed that.
know that.
So.
Sorry, I apologize. You should know that. I know that.
I was thinking Redwood City. What's
Okay,
the
one
Riverside County.
person knew the rest of
Riverside
the
County in Southern California.
We all know where it is.
We have talked
We
about
just
them
didn't
before.
know which.
So they have a project on
That's good.
Interstate 15 in the city of
Fine.
Temecula.
Yeah.
That they're implementing CARM on 3 ramps. That project is currently under construction. We will be starting system integration, which is installing all of the ITS devices in the summer, and that project should be up and running and operational by the end of the year. On their website, they have a very good public outreach page on the project. It has some informational videos on how the CARM system works, what are the features of their particular strategy, how ramp metering works in general. So they have a series of video, like YouTube type videos. They have a virtual meeting room. I can send the URL to Stephanie so that way she can share it with you. But yeah, certainly log in and take a look at theirs. And again, we would expect to do similar types of outreach activities as we get closer to deploying the project here.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's hitting what I was talking about, is the fact that just because they live here now, they may have come from Southern California, Washington, or other places. And I don't want them asking us things that we could have already solved because someone did some other place. But I don't hear that, so great job. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, Sridhar, and then we'll, to my right, we'll start heading around this way.
Thank you. You know, when we're looking at costs, like for instance, the $116 million for the express lanes, Have we just done enough express lanes that we know that it's gonna cost $116 million?
I mean, there's been, I am not on that project, but I can tell you that there's been a lot of work to design the various alternatives and to come up with the best solution, again, for what we can afford. If you could spend $2 billion, you'd probably get a better project, but we don't have $2 billion. So we have the project's like $300 million, isn't it?
That's from end to end.
Yeah.
We're doing a first phase.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, we always hear these costs, and then at the end of the day, for whatever reason, cost overruns. I know we're partnering with the contractor, so that's gonna help control costs a little bit. When we look at $116 million over the course of this project, what's the backup plan if that's not enough money to complete the project?
That's a Stephanie question.
You got to remember, the motto here is on time, under budget.
mean-
You're
CCTA
sitting at
is
the
a
wrong
good-
table right now.
Yeah.
It is part of the reason that the CCTA is looking to use progressive design build
Yeah, so.
to shift some of that risk.
Sure, yeah. Chair Anderson is right. We do have a good track record of being on budget and delivering things on time. We've had good experience with alternate delivery on the pedestrian overcrossing in San Ramon, where we're using delivery method that's not the traditional design bid bill. And actually, I've heard the change order's been a few $1,000s or whatever. So for the express lanes, we are contemplating using progressive design build, getting the design team and contractor on the same team so that we can better manage costs. And also for us to have more cost certainty with a guaranteed price if we're able to negotiate that. In the contingency, we don't just have MEGA, we have, Regional Measure 3 money. I think we feel confident that we would get to a good price, that we're within budget, but we're still early on, of course. That's what we're doing.
Sure, I appreciate the bridge analogy, but we have a project here with a lot of moving parts and a lot of components. And the bridge is basically just taking us over a trail. I mean, and I appreciate that we're on budget.
Oh, you mean,
for the-
yeah, of course,
I mean,
it's
this
a
is
different
much
magnitude.
bigger project.
No, understood. And we have experience delivering large projects at CCTA as well, with
Right.
interchange at 684. Those are all complex projects, and
Yeah, and there aren't any tariff issues, just so you know. So all the price of materials will stay the same.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And then, the second part of that is, are those costs? Those, I'm trying to be so professional over here. Not working.
Everything.
Are those costs in today's construction costs, or are those costs sort of been established for end-of-decade construction?
yeah, so when we apply for the grant, it's escalated through the expected construction year.
Okay.
So
and
it's
then-
accounting for escalation.
And I don't know if I should know this or not, but the metering agreements, there's 2 of them. Is that a template that we've pulled from other jurisdictions like Riverside or Australia? And is it one size fits all for the whole jurisdiction all through it? Or does each jurisdiction have a different agreement?
So the expectation is that will be a single agreement.
Okay.
Where all of the local stakeholders will be a party to that agreement. And that was something that came out of the previous discussions here, as well as with the locals, that they wanted it to be a single consistent agreement up and down the corridor, so that everyone understood what the specific responsibilities are. Now, that doesn't mean that if there are specific issues that you see in your jurisdiction, to bring those forward in those outreach meetings, so that way we can accommodate those. And in fact, at the meeting we had this morning at the county, we had exactly that discussion. If you have concerns about the operations of a specific ramp, then bring that to our attention, and to the extent that we can try to embed those issues into an agreement. But again, the expectation is it will be a single agreement. As far as templates, I mean, there are templates for other similar projects in this region. Express lanes often have a similar type of MOU. We do have the benefit of having RCTC having gone ahead of us and developed similar types of agreements with Caltrans. We're definitely not using Australian agreements for this stuff because they are very, very different. So yeah, we're using stuff that's been tried and tested with Caltrans, so that way we can have a higher level of success. Francis is actually the one that gets the credit for working through that process and using the various documents that we have developed so far in order to populate the elements of the agreement.
Great, I appreciate it, thank you.
Okay, Sridhar and then Carlin.
As a commuter on 680 to my work, this sounds pretty exciting for me, especially 680 North. That's where I get into the ramp in San Ramon. So my question is, you mentioned about performance metrics, right? So is there a way where we can share that performance metrics with our community members, like what it was and what it is afterwards?
So there will be multiple strategies in place in order to allow you to do that kind of work. We have a very robust dashboard that is part of the control system that we use for CARM, and that gives us very high levels of real-time data for how the corridor is performing. It also has a series of exhibits that shows how it's performing today versus historically. So you will have access to that public-facing dashboard, or to a public-facing version of that dashboard that can also potentially be shared through the CCTA website. Actually, the next item that I'm going to talk about is about the data management plan, and we'll get into some of the details on that. So if we can defer a moment. But then as part of these agreements, there is language that says that the data that's being generated by this project will be made available to your local TMCs. So that way, if you have a need for data, performance data on either the main line or the ramps, that will be made available. It will also obviously be made available to Caltrans so that they can incorporate it in the PEM system and allow others to retrieve the same information through PEM. So definitely multiple strategies for getting that data out so that way you can leverage it. I think the other thing that would be worth pointing out is we will be doing a series of evaluation reports through the duration of the pilot. We expect that in the first 3 months, we'll do an initial report and report back to this committee and the other committees within CCTA on sort of what the initial findings are, how things are working in the first 3 months. Then on an annual basis, we'll be doing a more robust evaluation for those 3 years, with the expectation that after the second year, that information will be getting used by CCTA and Caltrans to determine what CARM looks like moving forward, like once we get to the end of the pilot period. So there will be those critical milestones where there will be evaluations of those measures that we talked about earlier, so that way there'll be something tangible that you can take away and point to the public. Okay, before it looked like this, after it now looks like this. And you've seen similar slides to that in some of the presentations that we've done in the past.
Sounds good. My next question is there any possibility where the metering can create a overflow within the streets before the ramp? Is there any possibility, or if it is?
That's the next topic.
It's every city's greatest fear.
Yes.
So.
We've never heard that before.
Because of this
We only
metering.
spent an hour this morning going over that with the county staff. But it is one of the core features of the CARM strategy that all of the ramps along the corridor work as a single unit. And so if a particular ramp in San Ramon is struggling and we're seeing queues reach a critical threshold, 60 to 70% of the available storage on the ramp, it will start to call in other ramps in the corridor to say, okay, I need you to start increasing the amount of traffic that you're storing so that way we can release more traffic on this particular ramp where we're having stress. And I mean, it gets to the comment that Sue made earlier about some of those deficient ramps. We'll have some that we know are going to build up and basically reach their capacity almost immediately because there's not adequate storage. So the system will recognize that that's happening and increase the metering rate on those ramps so that it can release more quickly and compensate that by using other ramps to slow down the metering rates upstream and downstream so that way we can still achieve the benefits of the project. And I can tell you anecdotally that we've never had an incident in Australia or in the Colorado 9-month pilot that we did there, where a ramp was reported to back up onto an arterial street. If there's one thing this system does well, is managing the ramp queues. Now, the RCTC project is definitely going to present us with a bigger challenge because we only have 3 ramps to work with. So there's not a whole lot you can do to balance queues across 3 ramps. So we will really be stressing the system out by trying to manage the queues there. Fortunately, on your project, we have 19 ramps along the length of the corridor, so we have a lot more ability to spread that burden along the length of the corridor. We are very confident that it will work successfully here. RCTC will probably teach us a few lessons in terms of the limits of these systems, but yeah, rest assured that it is a priority of this system to ensure that we don't have that impact on the arterial system beyond what we anticipate as part of the plan. So if we do have a turn pocket that we need to use as storage, that would be identified in advance and that would be instrumented accordingly.
Sounds good. My last question. So we have this may be not for you or maybe for Stephanie. So we have a huge population within Tri-Valley, Dublin, especially Dublin and San Ramon. They travel southbound 680 for morning to IT work within the South Bay, pretty much in San Jose. So I saw that where you mentioned this is not going to be at this point in South 680, right? But in future, but is this good?
Yeah, so once you hit,
Once you have Alameda, it's a different CTA.
Oh, so
Yeah,
then we cannot.
We certainly hope to do southbound in Contra Costa County sooner rather than later. And we also hope that by demonstrating how successful this strategy can be in Contra Costa County, that our neighbors will be like, oh, yeah, we want to do that too. And then start extending the limits beyond the Contra Costa County line. And there are certainly economies of scale in terms of Caltrans being able to use the CARM system to incorporate additional ramp meters beyond the Contra Costa County limits.
That will be great. That will be
Anything you
great
can do to help
helpful,
instigate
yeah.
that would be greatly appreciated.
well, and that's why we do have Alameda County represented on this, and with Jean
Excellent.
Josie here. It's important, because they obviously share 680 with us, and there's often been that collaboration, especially in the Tri-Valley area.
So Gene, when you're doing that, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, there's the
Thank
680
you.
Coalition still exists, right?
Yeah, there's a
So we
680
do-
partnership
Yeah,
that,
so we do periodically give them updates on the project. And obviously, once we get closer to actually being operational, I would expect that they'll start to refresh. So we definitely keep the broader regional stakeholders aware of the project. As I said before, MTC sits on the executive steering committee, so the directors at MTC are aware of the project and know what's being implemented. So there's definitely visibility to what's going on. The whole purpose of a pilot project, of course, is to proof of concept. And so again, we're hopeful that the projects in both Riverside County and here in Contra Costa will demonstrate the effectiveness of the solution as another tool that Caltrans can use moving forward.
Awesome. So actually I said last, but this is my real last. When you mentioned about the technologies, the algorithm that you are going to use,
Yeah.
right? So could you please give a little bit more details? Are you using any artificial intelligence in that part of your algorithm, or how that is working?
So there's no artificial intelligence. It's basically measuring real-time traffic conditions. Let me take a step back. As the platform exists today, they're not using any artificial intelligence to drive the system. There's a suite of algorithms. So there's 8 different algorithms that are measuring different aspects of performance in the corridor. And every 20 seconds, the system recalculates what ramp metering rates are necessary at each of the ramps in the corridor in order to resolve the most critical issue at any given location. So it's not a single algorithm that's working. The system is very complex and is coordinating differently. It would probably be better to do this offline if you have an interest. We could certainly set up a follow-up meeting like we did this morning for the county to get into some of the details on how the platform actually works, because it does kind of go down into the weeds, but if you have an interest in it, it can be very compelling to demonstrate how the system actually works.
That will be awesome. Thank you.
Who were you meeting with the county? I don't know if Ken's wondering too, but who, were you with Monish? Or?
yeah,
Manish.
Monish and Ron and Fernando.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so Carlin.
Thank you. So I just had a question about the labor agreement, because I remember Tim Hale saying there would be one once we knew for sure that there was going to be a grant received. So A, is this definite that there's going to be a labor agreement, and what is the status of it in terms of getting it finalized? And third, is it with the Contra Costa Building Trade? Since
Correct.
I heard one of the presenters say you wanted to just have one agreement.
I think they were talking about the O&M agreement for the operation of CARM, not
Okay.
the project labor
Okay.
agreement. So the status of the project labor agreement is I think we're close to a final draft.
Okay.
We've had multiple discussions since the beginning of the year when we learned about the award. And the note about grant agreement being in place. So yeah, that is correct. We basically, we're getting the PLA to a final form, and once we do have a mega grant agreement signed, that's when we will execute the PLA. And without that, we won't have that PLA execute. Well, without the mega agreement, or without the mega funding, there would be no project per se, maybe to construct. So that's contingent upon the funding being available. that the PLA will be executed.
And so when do you anticipate you will know if the
When
funding
we
is
will go-
available or not?
Correct. Once we execute a mega agreement, then we can pursue the PLA being executed. Without that,
Right,
it won't
but-
happen.
No, I do understand
Yeah.
that. I'm just asking the timeline for when you're going to get the mega
Oh, the
grant
mega,
funding.
oh, so what I was saying, earlier in the when I was presenting on the updates, the direction from the federal FHWA staff is that they are waiting for a template, a new template to be used for the mega funding. Like, through December and January, we were working on a template, and it was nearly finished to be signed, and then we were told nothing's to be done.
Okay.
We have a new president, we need to wait.
Got it.
And then now they're saying they need to revamp the new agreement template to reflect the current president's priorities and what they, striking out things that are no longer relevant to this administration. So we're just waiting for the template to be developed, and then we would need to basically restart the whole process.
Okay, and then one last question I have along those lines, because I think all of us received the notification that was received. I think Tim Hale sent it out,
Yeah.
talking about, this administration being very specific about what efforts should not be included, specifically around DEI. And I know
Yeah.
that has been a component that we've talked about here with Innovate 680 and all this work. So how is that impacted, since that is a tenet of the Innovate 680 work? And if you want to get the agreement signed.
I don't recall the agreement template itself having anything to do with DEI or specifically mentioned, so I don't think we're in jeopardy of losing funding, and that's what we've heard from the federal staff.
Okay, that's fine.
For this particular funding program, like MEGA, it's heavily infrastructure and improves congestion. It's not, I think even projects that are on the softer side, like bike ped, seems like it's still safe from what we heard. So we're just kind of waiting to see what will happen, but it felt like from talking to the federal staff that the funding is there. It's just a matter of this template being developed and going through the process
Okay, thank
internally
you.
on their end, yeah.
Jean, go, excuse me, Jean, go, if I get my voice back. Jean, please go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the information, and I just have two very basic questions. And as it has been pointed out, I don't represent an agency in Contra Costa County. I'm here representing LAFTA, which is, of course, the Livermore-Amador Valley Transit Agency. Has the LAFTA staff been part of this? I know mostly we're about bus on shoulder, but has the staff, would they be part of the MOU? I know that LAFTA doesn't control any ramps, but an add-on question is the city of Dublin certainly has an on-ramp within their jurisdiction at El Costa. El Costa has two southbound on-ramps. The first is in Contra Costa County, the second is in Dublin. And so does this project include both of those southbound on-ramps, or only the northern of the two southbound on-ramps at El Costa? And is the Dublin staff part of these conversations?
So the feasibility studies that we've done did include both of the southbound ramps in the vicinity of El Costa, recognizing that one of them is outside of Contra Costa and would require an agreement with Alameda County. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. It would be disruptive to not have included that. So it is part of the feasibility study that was, or the corridor evaluation that was done a couple years ago, and part of the cost of the southbound project to include that ramp. Now, how that would get implemented as funding becomes available, that's probably a different question. We'd need to obviously work through the logistics of being able to do that. But it's certainly part of the project, and I believe it is part of the Caltrain SHOP project. So the ramp meters will get installed at that location regardless as part of the SHOP project. The SHOP project extends into Solano County and Alameda County and also along some of the adjacent corridors.
But they're not necessarily part of CARM.
The southbound side is
southbound-
not part of CARM as it's currently today. The hope is that we can identify additional funding to bring that forward sooner rather than later.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And then
Okay, any other questions? Or did you have something else, Danielle, you wanted to add, please?
I was going to speak to the other part of your question, so to the question about LAVTA. So your staff from LAVTA have been involved in all the conversations around the performance thresholds and the targets. So while they might not be a party to the signatory of the MOU, since it's not the operating jurisdiction for any of those ramps, they most certainly have been heavily involved in that dialogue and making sure that those overall performance thresholds and corridor metrics reflect transit and the needs of transit as well.
Okay, no further questions. Do we have any public comment? I know we did receive one letter from Mr. Swanson indicating that he did not experience traffic ever on 680 and does not see the need of this project. But some of us have a different experience, even in the San Ramon area. But anyway, just acknowledging we did receive that. A copy was sent to all board members for their consideration. Any other public comment, either received or present?
Yes, we do have one online guest who would like to speak. Her name is Kamala Parks with BART. Let me unmute her.
Hello, this is Kamala Parks from BART. Thank you. You pronounced my name correctly, so thank you. I'm wondering, so did I understand correctly that the funding you received basically X'd out, surgically removed the shared mobility hub part of the work?
This is Stephanie. I can answer that. We didn't cut it from we were not funded with that part. Like the funding that we were awarded excluded shared mobility hubs. It wasn't our doing. Obviously, we would like a whole package of requests to be granted, but what we did get funding for through the feds were Express Lane Phase 1 and the coordinated adaptive ramp metering.
Yeah, I'm just concerned because that's the whole point of Innovate 680 is to make sure that we're investing in more than just vehicle capacity and.
Yeah, I can. Maybe I can also add, we have applied, as you know, Kamala, we've been working together on the Shared Mobility Hubs project. We've applied for a couple of grants through MTC, and we're successful. We're just looking for other ways to fund the hubs at this time. There were no way, it wasn't a discussion of what we were getting for Mega. We were just awarded those monies, and it was specific to those two project components as part of our application. But, also adding that we've applied for SB1 funding, that we're waiting for results hopefully by June. And that includes the shared mobility hubs that did not get Mega.
Right. Just very disappointing that happened, and I think it does speak to actually a bit of a slant towards, funding more vehicle-oriented projects rather than a more multimodal focus. So, but anyway, thank you so much for clarifying. I really appreciate that, Stephanie.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other online comments?
We do not have any other remote.
Okay, and this was not an action item, but informational. So we're going to go on to our next item. And we do, of course, want to thank Og and Danielle for their participation on that one. And Derek, as he promised, is going to talk to us all about data management plan overview.
Yeah, there should be slides following this.
Here, I can fix it maybe. Oh, we probably escaped or something. Sorry. Share. There you go.
There we go. All right. Still not advancing. I did that, it's not working.
Yeah, I think sometimes it kind of goes into this weird thing.
Okay. How many traffic engineers and technology specialists does it take to figure out a slideshow? All right. So as you can imagine, with a program like Innovate 680 that is technologically focused, there's an expectation that there'll be a lot of data generated by the various projects. And conversely, a lot of the projects demand fairly robust data in order to be operated effectively, like CARM. So as part of the Innovate 680 process, we have been working on identifying a data management platform or strategy for how we manage the data that's coming into the program. The goal here is to identify where we have data gaps, if we have the data we need in order to operate the systems that we have, to be able to share it with our stakeholders so that way they can utilize the information as well. We obviously want to reduce or eliminate any redundancy or any duplication so that we don't have multiple projects collecting the same information but doing it differently. We want to be able to leverage all the data that we have. So we're working through a process to develop the processes and tools that we need in order to be able to manage the data that's coming into the program. That process is looking at both short-term and long-term needs. Obviously, as we have projects that are already moving into implementation, we need to start mobilizing and have ability to take in the data that those projects are generating. But then longer term, we want to be able to develop a system where we're basically consolidating all of that information that's coming in and getting maximum effectiveness out of how we use that. There are some opportunities that exist. CCTA already has a performance monitoring dashboard that was developed. It's on their website. It's a static dashboard. It doesn't do real-time data, but it does do summary data for the previous week and the previous month. And so we are hopeful that we'll be able to leverage the work that's already been done on that dashboard to potentially help serve some of our needs moving forward. And then the projects themselves have various data management capabilities. I've talked a little bit about CARM. Smart Signals has a need for center-to-center communications. So we'll obviously be looking at leveraging any of those capabilities as needed in order to allow us to centralize the data, deal with security, allow for data to be shared by all of the stakeholders and those that necessarily use it. And ultimately, if we need to, go out to the industry and explore what other opportunities are out there, what other data management platforms exist if none of the things that we have at our disposal today are able to serve that need. So the process so far, we've completed an existing data sources and need assessment, and that's involved engagement with both the Innovate 680 project teams as well as your staff to identify what data needs you might have, how that sort of fits into the broader mix for the overall program, and identify any of those gaps that exist, identify any needs in terms of how data gets shared, how it gets aggregated, ownership, governance, all those issues. It builds largely on the Innovate 680 program concept of operations. That's something that's been discussed at one of the previous 19 meetings, so you're hopefully familiar with that. But it basically laid out the very broad program of Innovate 680 and how all of these pieces fit together so that way, again, we can maximize the effectiveness of the information that we're getting and sharing through those programs. So we'll take a look at the Sue Nowak honorary architecture diagram. The data management is right at the heart of the Innovate 680 program. So these two, the Countywide Connected Data Center and the Decision Support System, are really the core of the data management strategy. Again, the expectation is that we'll be ingesting data from a wide variety of sources, both within the program and also outside of the program, from partner agencies. That information gets fed into the decision support system to help inform how decisions are being made about the operation of the system, hopefully using things like AI on situational awareness type dashboards to identify where there are anomalies in the network so that we can be proactive in responding to those, and then feeding data to the various programs in Innovate 680 in order to allow them to do their jobs. I apologize, Sue. So if we dig in a little bit closer, just as an example for CARM, we expect that there will be fairly robust operational data that will be derived from the vehicle detectors on both the main line and the ramps, and also performance data on the ramps themselves, how the ramp metering system's working, what the queue lengths look like, what the wait times look like, all that sort of stuff. That data will obviously get aggregated for CARM purposes, but we also want to potentially be able to leverage it for other purposes. So again, provide it to other stakeholders so that way they can inform PAMs, you can inform your own local TMCs, and also as the basis for completing our performance evaluations, being able to use that information to demonstrate that the project is actually working well. We'll also be looking at some of the existing data sources that are out there, things like PEMS, things like third-party data to help supplement where we have holes. and particularly to support some of the before and after comparisons. Obviously, until we get our devices out in the field, we can't collect the data from them. So we have to look at existing systems like PEMS to get a sense of how things are today. And they give us a baseline that we can compare in the future moving forward to the extent that PEMS is still out there. And so we'll be using some of those legacy systems to also supplement our data management. These are all short term. I mean, we need these things to be available to us when we start the pilot project so that way we can be doing the evaluation and providing the feedback to you on how the system is working. But longer term, as additional projects come online, things like the part-time transit lanes will be able to benefit from the same data that CARM is collecting. It will have very robust information on how the main line's performing, and we'll be able to tell the PTTL system that the speeds are dropping below 35 miles an hour. Now the buses can move into the shoulder. It will also allow us to monitor what's actually happening in the shoulder. Are the buses in the shoulder? Is there other traffic in the shoulder? Are there things that we need to resolve as part of that? And ultimately, that can inform the ramp meters so that way they can coordinate with the buses to ensure that the ramp meters aren't releasing traffic from the ramps when the buses are passing through those intersections. So there's obviously synergies between the projects, and so we'll be looking for those synergies and trying to ensure that we can maximize the effectiveness of all of the projects using the data that we have available to us. So as a starting point for the data management process, we developed what we're calling a data sources and uses matrix. And that was developed in collaboration with each of the Innovate 680 project teams. So the 6 teams that are working on the different projects, CARM, CATS, Express Lanes Completion, Part-Time Transit Lanes, Shared Mobility Hubs, et cetera. As well as your TAC member agencies, the staff from your agencies. We wanted to be able to identify if you have specific agency needs that can be met through Innovate 680. And to the extent possible, make that happen. The matrix has a whole bunch of fields that look at all sorts of different aspects of data management, the overall program goals and projects, the performance monitoring needs that we have, what types of data are out there, who owns it, how's it governed, is it historical, is it real time, how can it serve our needs? And so that all informed the discussions that were going on with the project teams and the TAC member agencies, and it evolved as we went through that process. So as I said, we started with the Innovate 680 project teams, recognizing that this is a data management program for Innovate 680, so we wanted to make sure that we were meeting their needs first. We met with each of the teams, discussed their data needs, discussed what they were expecting to get back from the program, and that informed the matrix that then allowed us to go out to the partner agencies and get a sense of what their specific needs are. And because I feel like I've been talking too much, I'm going to hand it over to Danielle now to talk about that process, because Danielle was involved in it and can give you some feedback on how the agencies responded.
All right, so when we met with your partner agency staff, again, this was one of those opportunities where we felt it was most prudent to meet individually, because some of you are the owners and operators of existing systems. There needs to be an interface between those and that of Innovate 680, so it was most efficient to meet one-on-one. So the objective was to understand the individual agency's data needs, to understand connections with existing systems, and it was really focused on having that conversation about both short-term and long-term. So some of the high-level input or feedback that we received was that there was definitely a desire to ensure the proper project interfaces, but also amongst your individual agencies. So a great example is the coordinated adaptive traffic signals effort, and making sure that there is that important interface between your local traffic operations centers or transportation management centers. We had a lot of conversation with your local agencies on looking at innovative or alternative data sources, making sure we're staying on top of, to Member Stepper's point, the new and innovative ways that there are now available for collecting some of these data and making sure that we're using that to input into our systems. We also heard from our transit operators about making sure that we're looking at efficiencies for both on vehicle equipment, as well as the typical instrumentation on the infrastructure. And then using new vehicle detection devices for multiple purposes. So if we're installing new detection, how can we make sure that we're leveraging that across all of the projects and making it accessible to you all as stakeholders. We also received lots of comments when we dug in to the performance metrics, making sure that we're tracking things and looking holistically at the system. So not just looking at the ramp facilities, but to your point, making sure we're looking at the functioning of the arterials, making sure that there's proper instrumentation on those routes so that we can take a more comprehensive corridor performance stance. Also looking at transit on-time performance and ridership, making sure that we're not only focusing on the single occupant vehicles, and are we thinking more holistically about moving people rather than just individual vehicles. And looking at how we use and our most efficient bus routes for these projects. So that was a big part of these conversations. You can also imagine lots of conversations on future data governance needs. So these are where those O&M agreements start to come into the fold. So these conversations to date focused more on the what and making sure we had the what and the granularity of the what properly identified. But it's without reason, that it would make sense that the conversation starts to go into the who and the how, and that all will have to get fleshed out in specific governance agreements that are to come. So, of course, lots of questions on that timeline. So, for next steps for the data management plan, we intend to update our systems architecture diagram. That's Vice Chair Nowak's favorite diagram. So we're going to make sure that we are updating that. And as Darren said, we're making sure to look at a possible data platform that needs to support the near-term needs, but also the longer-term vision. So we'll be looking at all of that, and you see some of the important considerations that go along with that. We'll be developing specific data management recommendations, and we'll share those with you at a future meeting. This comes down to reviewing the existing performance dashboard that Darren mentioned, also looking at the smart signals center-to-center platform capability, and all of this will get documented in a final memo. And then we're going to complete this process by this summer, and then what happens after the official data management plan itself is complete is there will be more discussion on those data governance O&M agreements. And as the projects evolve and we start to kind of come from the bottom up, if you will, because this is kind of taking a top-down view. But as we start to get more information from the projects as they move further along into design, and we start getting more information from the bottom up, the expectation is that this data management plan will get updated accordingly. So with that, that concludes this presentation. We'll be happy to take any questions.
Okay, Sridhar, you've got all that information. What else do you want?
Yeah. As a professionally, I'm in database technology and data engineering. So this sounds like this is part of my work meeting.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
And here we thought when Scott Perkins left transportation, all of our questions from San Ramon would be over. So you're channeling your predecessor.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Regarding the data that you're going to push into the data centers, right? And I see that you have the governance that you're working on that. Every technology comes with drawbacks, unintended drawbacks, especially nowadays we do see a lot of ransomware attacks, right? So how we are going to protect that in this case?
Yeah, certainly considerations like security, like storage, those types of issues are important, and they're being evaluated as part of the process. There's other aspects as well. Certain data that gets developed by the CARM system can't be shared. So we needing to understand the limitations of the data that we are generating and what can be shared versus what can't be. The way that we access the Caltrans system with CARM has limitations to then our ability to share the data downstream of that. So we are working through all of those things to, again, in that matrix, identify these are metrics that are being developed that we can share that information and make it publicly available. These are things that are proprietary for the system itself. Understanding those limitations and then building a secure system that we can hopefully avoid issues like ransomware and those types of situations.
So
but you're more of an expert on this than I am, so.
So And just to make sure that we are safe, right? So in future, how we are creating that governance, that is very important to us. For example, if it happens, then just even before that, who owns the data?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it like your technology, your company owns it, or we own as a county? Who owns?
Certainly the premise is that CCTA owns the data.
We own the
for
data.
the Innovate 680 program, so you own it. It's definitely not proprietary to us or to any of the companies that are providing the services. But your point is well founded, that the understanding sort of the limitations of that governance, the ownership, the ability to use certain sources of data. For CARM, for example, the system operates in the AWS cloud, so all of the data is basically getting fed to the AWS cloud, and then from there we would need to determine how we provide data to the various sources that want access to it, and what form that looks like. But by doing those types of mechanisms, it helps to enhance security, because they are obviously specialists in managing data, and can help us through that process of how to ensure that it's safe and secure and accessible as needed.
Yeah, definitely, AWS is champions in that area. That sounds good. Now, if in case attacks happen, or even before that, who is going to maintain this system, ongoing operations-wise?
Maintain the system?
Yeah. So
again, the expectation is that CCTA will primarily be maintaining the system. Obviously, we'll have key partners like Caltrans. They generate a lot of data. They will need to use a lot of the data, so we'll be developing these systems and operating and maintaining them in cooperation with key stakeholders. But I think the expectation is that the Countywide Connected Data Center and the Decision Support System is a CCTA entity, and that there'll be agreements with those partner agencies on roles and responsibilities, just like we're doing O&M agreements for the projects themselves. There'll be O&M agreements for the operations and maintenance of those data management tools, and who has what role and responsibility.
So once you implement this, you're gone. So it's going to be CCTA and Caltrans' responsibility to manage it.
I certainly can't speak to, once we implement this, whether we're gone or not. I hope that's not the case.
You mean Darren specifically?
But yeah, right.
I think the plan is to have consultants to,
Yeah, CCTA obviously does contract for various specialties, and so it would seem to me, based on their current capabilities and what they're also doing with their existing dashboard, that they would be contracting some of that work in order to ensure that they're getting the appropriate operations and maintenance skills in order to be able to manage those systems. Whether that's something that my company would be doing or another company would be doing, I'm confident that there are other companies out there that are more qualified to be doing that kind of work. The firm that's doing the existing dashboard are very capable in developing those types of capabilities, which is one of the reasons that we're looking to evaluate if there is potential to use that as a foundation for what we want moving forward. So again, we'll investigate the range of options that are available to us. It will go through the CCTA governance structure in order to make decisions on exactly what system they want to use and how they want to manage that. I would expect that will have a contracting responsibility as part of it. Who does that? I mean, that's a decision that obviously gets made in the future once we know exactly what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, because that will become very important for us once we implement, then ongoing operations, patching, or fixing the bugs, issues, and also if some ransomware attack happens, who's going to pay for it? Is it we are going to pay for it? Or is it your organization going to pay for it? No. Those things, we need to flush out all those details. Yeah, so we need to flush out all those details in the data governance. And that will be great. One more question is about the data. Is it the data can be shared with the public? Let's say, for example, in future, some organizations can come up and say that, hey, we need that data. For example, we have this public record, PR.
Public information requests.
Yeah, so where we have to share all the data, right? So is that also part of this?
I would suggest not universally. Again, it will depend on the specific type of data and what it represents. We also obviously have to balance privacy concerns you know, that sort of stuff. So we can't be putting account information out there for express lanes, transponder holders and that sort of stuff. So things like volumes and speeds on freeways, that information is already publicly available through websites like PEMS. We would expect that we'll be feeding the data that we're collecting with our systems through systems like PEMS to make some of it available. But the performance dashboard information that's being developed in streams, the sort of the post-processed information, that won't necessarily be publicly available for download. But we do expect that there will be public-facing dashboards that will allow people to log in and look at certain pieces of information. So again, it's all about assessing sort of what are the needs, what are the available options that we have, you know, what's the most appropriate path forward in order to accomplish that particular need. And then, you know, is that information that is raw data that we're making available publicly so that universities can research stuff and, you know, that, at that level? Or is it really refined, polished information that may have privacy implications that then would limit our ability to share that information? So those are all the things that are getting assessed as we go through this process to try and make these decisions. I mean, quite honestly, it will be a evolving, like the plan is a snapshot, but it will be an evolving plan as we implement these strategies and get a better sense of what is actually coming into the systems, what's possible, what's not. And we would expect to be working with this committee and other committees in order to make those decisions.
So Stephanie, is it possible for me to get the information regarding the database governance as it keeps evolving or building?
Sure, like Darren was saying, as we develop this plan, and we're in early stages of this plan, in the planning stage for this specific piece on data. As it gets developed, we will certainly bring it to this body. And if you want to be personally, give you the report or whatever, or data and information, we can do that. Or we can share through Member Armstrong, and he can distribute it that way too.
I think we can also, I mean, we have met with San Ramon as part of the outreach process. But if you have an interest in learning more about it, we can certainly connect you with my colleague that's doing most of this work. And you can have a discussion with them on sort of what their thinking is and sort of where we're at right now and what that might look like moving forward.
Yeah, I think also the staff person, the TAC member. Yeah. So, Member Farrows, I know this is your first meeting, so we have a pretty robust governance structure independent of this work. We have a TAC that consists of one technical staff from each of the local jurisdictions along 680 corridor, and every major key component or element or initiatives, we go through the TAC, and then it comes to this body. So there's been many touch points with your staff regarding this particular effort, so we'll be happy to connect the dots for you as well. And if you want specific data or reports and deliverables, we're happy to share.
And you've got Chris right there,
Chris
ready
Weeks is right
to share all that information.
And he's our TAC, well, one of our TAC members, depending on the topic. Yeah, for mobility hubs, it's been
Excellent, thank you.
Chris.
That's all my questions.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Just very quickly, so whenever I'm looking at systems, I'm thinking in the city of Concord, when we're now in the process of the system that everyone uses. It's called Lawson. We're getting rid of it. It's been around for 20 years, and there was a whole procurement process and effort. And so I guess my question is this the company that we're going to be going with to establish this data management system, is it the only one that does this? Is there a procurement process? How is this going to be able to, you know, because there's new technologies introduced all the time. So I'm talking about sustainability,
understood.
I guess.
We are many steps removed from making those types of decisions.
Okay.
Right now we're trying to get a handle on what are the data needs, you know, what are the types of data that we need to manage, you know, what does that look like, how does it fit within Sue's architecture diagram?
And just don't test me when you change it, update it. Don't test me.
Well, it's one of those quizzes. You've got to identify the difference. You've got to see the change. Pick the changes.
Well, we should all have it memorized. You just use a little mnemonic code and you can fill it all out.
Send it to her as a photo
on
a text message.
It'll be a side-by-side. Identify the differences. So Again, we're investigating whether the existing data management platform dashboard that CCTA has already developed, I don't remember, what's Ali's company called? They have a consultant that basically helped support, DevTech, there you go, that helps support developing that dashboard's capabilities. I think it has a lot of potential to be able to serve some of the needs that we have moving forward. I don't know if it can ultimately accommodate all of our needs, but we do think that there's a foundation there that's worth investigating. So we do have a meeting with them next week to further explore that now that we've got a better handle on the types of data that we'll need to manage and what we want to get out of the system. We do have the option to conduct an RFI to reach out to the industry and get a sense of what other tools are out there on the shelf right now that can help serve our needs. And then to your point, this is an evolving business. Data management is changing all the time. And so I think the expectation would be as we move forward and as we start to implement, we'll be keeping abreast of, what are emerging approaches to doing this stuff, what are good examples of solutions that do the things that we want them to do, and then try to emulate those as we move forward. So yeah, we're definitely many steps removed from having to make decisions on which platform we're going to use. And we will go through that sort of process of evolution to get us there, and you will get dragged along with us in that process to sort of help inform what that looks like.
Yeah, I remember Lawson.
Okay, any other questions by members? Do we have any questions or comments online? I know we do not have a written correspondent for this agenda item. That's for the next one.
Correct.
But just wondering, is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this item?
There are no online or in-person public comments.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're going to move on to our final business agenda item, and this is to talk about our shared mobility hubs. And so Stephanie is coming back up to do this. This is also purely informational, and Stephanie, it's all yours.
Yes, okay, I'll try to be brief. Eye on time. I know we've been here for a while. So shared mobility hubs is actually what Kamala was bringing up earlier when she made a public comment. So the project is essentially creating a mobility hub in strategic places along the corridor where different modes come together, and really to facilitate the removal of barriers to try different mobility options rather than driving. So it's a place where various modes can come together with amenities that make transit use or other modes more attractive to use. In 2023, CCTA completed a feasibility study studying 8 hubs along the I-680 corridor. We actually went through the effort of at least having 1 hub per city or town, just so that we can look at it equally and everyone had a hub that we study as sort of a template or a type for moving forward for implementation. There are 3 buckets of amenities for mobility hubs, which I'll go over quickly here, and they will be demonstrated in the 3 projects I will go over in a moment. So transit amenities are things that will help transit riders plan their trip better or connecting their modes better, so they can include transit signal priority, better waiting areas that's enhanced, maybe it's covered instead of just being like sitting or baking in the sun, real-time travel information to really help them plan their trips and knowing if the bus is delayed and whatnot. These are the transit amenity. The list is not meant to be exhaustive, nor they will have all of them in every hub, and each hub will be designed to tailor to the community that it is in, but these are just a list of things that could be considered as transit amenities. The next one is bicycle amenities. They're pretty straightforward, better bike paths, e-bike chargers, since they're more popular these days, parking for bikes, and even like repair stations for bikes. Pedestrian amenities include better lighting, a safer walkway, safer crossings, really encouraging the use of that space that the mobility hub creates. Motorized services amenities are those that are that will help with better efficiently using the space of the mobility hub and maximizing the use. So car share, having a space to accommodate Uber and TNCs, better loading zones for passengers and EV chargers. And then lastly, support services amenities are those that make using the mobility hub having some convenience to it, like perhaps a locker for delivery or Wi-Fi and chargers for your phone or your laptops, bathrooms, retail services that are maybe mobile, and then solar canopy, and even like ambassadors to help direct you to where you need to go and help answer questions. So we've identified 3 hubs that are considered priority for implementation. You may recall a couple years ago, and I touched upon it in my updates, that we received a grant from the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program to really facilitate the 680 Express Bus service that was identified in the state rail plan back in 2018. So basically, there's rail service to the south of the county in Dublin and north of our county in Martinez, and there's this rail gap on 680. And the Express Bus project is to really bridge this gap with the Express Bus on 680, a new Express Bus that runs from Dublin, Pleasanton, BART to the Amtrak station Martinez. And the 3 hubs of Martinez Amtrak Station, BART Station at Walnut Creek, and San Ramon Bishop Ranch were identified as the key stops or limited stops of this Express Bus. And this Express Bus is aimed to be operated with hydrogen fuel electric buses when they are available. CCTA is the lead for the mobility hubs, where the transit operators of LAFTA and County Connection are responsible for the Express Bus operation. So I'm going to have a few slides to update you on the progress of these 3 hubs. So Martinez, this is one that's most further along. We received a grant from MTC a year and a half ago, but just existing condition, you guys should be very familiar with the Amtrak station in Martinez. It has the rail service. It has about 9 bus routes, 400 plus parking spaces available currently, and there are amenities like bike lockers and restroom in this site. The proposed concept, we've been working on this for the past 9 months, really working with our stakeholders, transit operators, County Connection, Amtrak, Tri-Delta Transit, WestCat, and the city of Martinez to really develop this concept level plan. Really, the key elements are to reconfigure the bus bays in front of the station versus just having people get off the bus and have to sort of walk across the parking lot. So all the buses are now up front, pull in front of the curb space there. We would have new bus shelters with larger waiting areas. The ingress and egress improvements on the site will be for those biking and walking. We are creating a dedicated bus lane shown in red. And then the green, does this work? No. Oh yeah, the green band here are new bike paths that are dedicated bike lanes for bikers. We would also expand this EV lot, and then a new better located bike pickup and drop-off area. It's currently right here. This is more of a dedicated space and allowing more bus space to be at the front where people would get off the bus and run to their train and not have to kind of run across the parking lot. I mentioned that we secure a small grant from MTC that will enable us to do a smaller phase 1 that will include what is shown in dark, like all the ultimate improvements is now shaded back, so it's grayed out. So those shown in color is what we'll be constructing as phase 1. So wayfinding, better wayfinding to get a sense of place when you get to the station, you know where to go. Bike amenities such as bike lockers and e-bike charging up top. The pickup drop-off will be part of phase 1, as well as this bike lane that takes you in front of this frontage road to Ferry Street. So this is our funding plan. We have secured $3 million in the MTC grant for us to do a full design of all the improvements that was on the first slide with all the colored improvements, but constructing only the second slide with the few initial segments or initial improvements that consist of bike facility and the connection, better pickup and drop-off improvements, and then also signage and wayfinding. And as I was mentioning in Kamala when she came on, that we submitted a SB1 grant application, and we're waiting for results that should come in June. I just want to highlight that as we develop these concepts and improvements, we really rely on public outreach and also working with stakeholders. We've held a few pop-up events in February and March. We did online surveys to really gather the input from the residents as well as the users of the site. We connected with the Amtrak folks to get their mailing list to see if they could participate in an online survey to tell us what they would like to see at this location. We also had meetings with the downtown business. It's called Downtown Martinez and Company, a business sort of organization, and then the property owners. We advertise our survey on our social media website to really engage the public to fill out the survey so we know what they would like to see. And then also we presented to the City Council at Martinez earlier in April. So just high-level overview, the top 3 things that people wanted to see in the site like this is to be able to see real-time transit information live when they're at the location, improve safety and security, and also have amenities at the station like Wi-Fi and charging station. And about 61% of the survey respondents were from Martinez, or they live in Martinez. So the timeline for this one is that we are in environmental clearance. We completed our outreach effort, went to the City Council and received comments. We're hoping to complete our environmental clearance at end of summer, then we can get into design, and then construction will hopefully start in the spring of 2026. So next 2 hubs are less developed, as we just received another grant. So for Walnut Creek, this is this existing site. You guys are aware there's Solano Express, LAFTA, County Connection to stop here, as well as the BART train. There are bike racks and lockers here at this location at Walnut Creek Park Station, and then there are 2 parking garages. And also to note, at this particular site, there is the transit village with the TOD development here at the Walnut Creek Park Station. So this is the concept. It's high level still that we've been working with. A similar approach as Martinez. We've been working with the transit operators, BART, the city, to go over this concept to make sure we have buy-in on all the improvements that are proposed. Mainly the one significant component is the bike improvements, having Class 2 bike lanes on Hillside. So basically, going under the freeway, there's a disconnect between the communities it will be west of 680 to the station, so a better bike path that connects that community to the BART station. Better bike lanes are on California, and also on Oak Boulevard as we cross Ignacio Valley Road. And also at the back of the station, a bike lane on Riviera. We also would look into having a pickup drop-off area. Currently, we're contemplating somewhere along this area. That's not drawn because it's not really defined at this time. We will also look into EV chargers and also better wayfinding, which is a key point of the MTC Mobility Hub grant, to have better wayfinding that is consistent across the region. So the funding for this is we also got the same grant, but a different cycle, about $3 million, to develop this site. Similar approach to Martinez. This is enough for us to do a full design of the entire package of improvements, but have enough funding to construct a smaller phase 1. And then the SB1 grant application, it actually included this hub as well. We are doing environmental clearance of the entire package currently and hoping to get that done by end of this calendar year. And then design will start end of the year through 2026 and hopefully go into construction early 2027. Last but not least is the Bollinger Canyon Road Shared Mobility Hubs. There is a transit center in City of San Ramon right now on Executive Parkway. There's various County Connection Express bus as well as local bus routes stopping at this site. In developing Shared Mobility Hub concept, there's been another location. There are 2 locations that's being considered. First is improving the existing transit center site by improving the bus space, better connection between the transit center to the Iron Horse Trail, implementing real-time signage and wayfinding program, and also including some pedestrian and bicycle improvements, and also implementing some shared mobility services like the shuttle, the Presto shuttle, to stop here and connecting to Bishop Ranch in the future. Option 2 was developed in conjunction with the transit operators and the city and Sunset Development. This is a second option that we've been looking at. This will include or consist of improving or changing the space that is at the intersection of Bishop and Camino Ramon. Those are familiar with this site is that there's the city center shopping areas right at this corner, and like Fieldworks is right there. That seems to be a good landmark for people to place themselves. So basically the buses will kind of circulate around the building and exit this way. And I know the city has plans to develop a residential or hotel in this area, and those familiar with this area is that on Camino Ramon there is now a huge residential development along the street, so that will serve both the residential area as well as the commercial area, city center. The funding is that we received that TIRCIP grant that I mentioned earlier to develop a shared mobility hub site, so it's about $11 million, and we also have about $1.5 million from Regional Measure 3. Right now, we're still working with staff at City and Sunset and the transit operators to select which option for this hub location. We're hoping to kind of have that finalized middle of this year in June or summertime, so that we can advance to environmental clearance. We did receive this grant about 2 years ago, so we really do need to move forward with the location so that we can make good on our grant and continue and construct the project. And with that, I will take any questions that you may have.
Okay, any questions by members sitting around the dais? Okay, Sue and then Shivar.
Just on the wayfinding signs, I'm assuming are going along with the wayfinding signs that MTC is putting in place.
Yeah, as part of the, as part of their funding.
Okay, thanks.
Consistent.
Yeah, we're supposed to be using their guidance or guidelines standards.
Okay, and then Sridhar and then Karen.
So, there is a trend, more and more of our youth, especially in Trevally, San Ramon especially, they're registering and applying for UC Merced. And Martinez Amtrak station, that became very important for our youth to travel to their school, to UC Merced. Now, you mentioned about the safety security. That's one of the things I always receive some feedback about it. So could you please elaborate a little bit on what is the plan on safety and security in that space?
On which, on the Martinez or just
Martinez one?
Martinez.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we went to the city council, they also mentioned about the need for safety. I think for, in the near term, better lighting, a safer way for bikes and ped to access the site. Because right now, what we hear is that they park their car and sometimes they have to kind of run kind of through the parking lot to get to the platform. So with the improvements, we're hoping there's clear paths of travel for bike and peds, and the lighting is a big piece. The other thing that was brought up that is probably a future endeavor is, or working with the city, is if we convert the southern lot to a transit hub, like we show with the bus space, we would need to use, or the users would need to perhaps park on the northern location of the parking lot. And right now, the pedestrian overcrossing sometimes is not opened or the gates are locked. So the note or comment from the city was that we should work with staff to make sure that's addressed. Because right now, I'm not sure I can go back, but so those are the two things that were specific asks from our stakeholder in working with them. If I can go back, sorry. So right now there's this, can you see my cursor? So there are two parking lots. There's southern and northern parking lot. If we were to make all these improvements, we're taking away some parking, so there would be a need for users of this site or Amtrak riders to park on the northern parking lot, which is pretty underutilized at this point, at this time. So we were converting this southern parking lot to more of a transit center. We would need to make sure that this bridge is opened at all time, at business hours when the trains are running. which is an issue right now because the elevators are sometimes broken or there might be vandalism. So we would need to tackle this safety improvements, safety issue, I guess, when we actually implement this second phase or a future phase. So those are some specific things that we would look into for safety.
Yeah, if it is, we are talking like increasing light and putting that, that's not going to really help. It's not going to make any of those students feel safe to travel. The whole idea of this project is not going to be helpful for our youth. I think we need to explore more options, how to make them feel more safe and secure in that area.
Okay, yeah, we can look into that. The comments received were from the city staff about lighting, which is important to them, as they're also a key stakeholder. So, but we can explore ways to make young people feel safer. I'm happy to take any comments that you may have specifically to that point, or in later meetings if desired.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, Karen, you have a comment, question?
Yeah, will there be a place for putting ballot box somewhere so there's a, to drop ballots during elections?
We can work with this, on this particular site?
You said there'd be
And that's
amenities.
a county elections. That's a
Yeah, I'm
Kristen
not sure we
Connolly,
can-
but we could do it.
Chair Anderson says yes, then yes.
I bet Kristen would let us do it. Yeah, yeah, but that's a great idea. We do want to encourage people voting, and what a better way when they're ready to commute. Any other questions, comments? Okay, and I know we did receive public comment on this. I just want to emphasize this is meeting 19, and we've been studying this for over 19 meetings. Mr. Swanson was concerned that we were rushing to judgment, and also his concern was expressed that we are taking away from BART ridership. And really, this is very, very complementary, our shared mobility hubs, to get people onto transit of their choice, whether it be by bike, by car, by bus. We want to get people on transit. So we don't see this as taking away from ridership, but benefiting it. So any online comments with regard to this?
Excuse me.
Or any
There
other
are
written
no
comments?
online comments.
Okay,
or in
then
person.
that is the end of this item. Thank you, Stephanie, for that comprehensive report. And that is the end of our scheduled agenda items. Do we have anything else? I know, Danielle, you sort of have a wrap-up, hey, let's talk about what's next. And do you have any sort of the open-ended question? Does anyone want to talk about something just a little bit longer?
No, I'm sure we're good on that, but it's more for the next meeting. We already sketched out a couple of things that you guys want to hear about, but if there's anything else that you would like to make sure comes back to you at your next meeting, please let us know now so we can work with staff to agendize that.
Thank you. And I think a lot of us are just really excited that we're actually doing stuff now. We're
That's
not
right.
just talking about it.
That's right.
Things are actually being built. They're going forward. Okay, well, thank you all. Our next meeting is scheduled, if I turn the page, for July 9th. That is 4th of July following week, so hopefully that won't pose a problem, but we may want to poll members of this committee just to make sure people are in town. Politicians, they're always in town for the 4th of July because they want to be in a great parade, so I don't think that's a problem, but just in case, as always, we want to make sure we'll have a quorum. Thank you all, and look at us, we've got 3 minutes before 8. Very helpful. Thank you so much.
Recording stopped.